The wine glass hit the wall 6 inches from my head and shattered into 100 pieces across my daughter-in-law's kitchen floor before my own son finished calling me selfish. "You heard me, Mom," Trevor said, not even flinching at the glass, not even looking at his wife, Jessica, who stood there breathing hard like she'd just won something. "You're selfish. You've always been selfish. This whole family revolves around what you need." I stood frozen in the doorway of a kitchen I'd helped pay the down payment on, still holding the casserole dish I'd brought for Sunday dinner, and I genuinely could not understand how I had gotten here. 2 hours earlier, I'd been setting the table for what I thought was a normal family dinner. Then Jessica brought up money, the way she always did lately, this time about my late husband's small life insurance policy, the one I'd used to help pay for their kitchen renovation 8 months ago, back when I still believed helping them meant something. "We need more Karen," Jessica had said, refilling her wine glass for the third time. "The renovation loan is still eating us alive. You have savings sitting there doing nothing. That money is for my retirement, Jessica. I already gave you $30,000. 30,000 doesn't even cover the cabinets," she snapped. "You act like we're asking you to hand over your whole life. I'm asking you to understand I don't have unlimited money." That's when Trevor, my own son, the boy I raised alone after his father left, looked at me across that table and said I was selfish for not giving more. Jessica's wine glass came a moment later, close enough that I felt the air move past my ear before it hit the wall. I set the casserole down on the counter, hands shaking, and walked out without another word. I drove home in silence, replaying 29 years of raising that boy alone, working double shifts at the hospital, skipping my own needs so his never went unmet, and somehow arriving at a kitchen floor covered in broken glass and the word selfish still ringing in my ears. I didn't sleep that night. Around midnight, I got a call I never expected. "Mrs. Patterson. This is Officer Reyes with the County Sheriff's Department. Is this Karen Patterson, mother of Trevor Patterson?" My whole body went cold. "Yes, is Trevor okay?" "He's fine, ma'am, but there's been an incident at his residence tonight. We need you to come down to the station." The story unraveled over the next 3 hours in pieces that made less sense the more I heard them. After I left, Trevor and Jessica had kept drinking, kept arguing, this time about the same money that had started the fight with me. Somewhere around 11, according to the responding officers, Jessica had thrown a second glass, this one connecting with Trevor's forehead, cutting deep enough that a neighbor heard the shouting, saw blood through the window, and called it in. I sat in that sheriff's station lobby at 1 in the morning, still wearing the cardigan I'd put on for a family dinner that felt like it had happened a lifetime ago, and waited to find out how badly my son had been hurt by the same hands that had thrown a glass at me hours earlier. Trevor had 6 stitches above his eyebrow when they finally let me see him. He looked smaller than I'd seen him in years, sitting on a hospital gurney, staring at his own hands like they belonged to someone else. "Mom." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry about earlier, I shouldn't have said that. We'll talk about that later." I sat down next to him, careful of the IV line. "Right now I need you to tell me what happened." What he told me over the next hour peeled back a layer of his marriage I'd never fully seen, because he'd worked hard to hide it from me out of pride, out of shame, out of the same instinct that makes people protect the person hurting them longest. Jessica's temper wasn't new. The wine glass at me hadn't been the first thing she'd thrown. There had been holes in drywall Trevor claimed were from moving furniture. There had been an ER visit 2 years ago he'd blamed on a bike accident. There had been a slow, steady pattern of Jessica escalating whenever money, control, or attention didn't go her way, and Trevor had spent years absorbing it quietly, then apparently redirecting some of that pressure onto me, the one person in his life who'd never once thrown anything back. "I called you selfish because I was scared," Trevor admitted, staring at the hospital floor. If I told you the truth about what's been happening in that house, I'd have to admit how bad it's gotten. It was easier to make you the problem. Jessica was arrested that night, charged with domestic assault after Trevor, in front of the responding officers and with a fresh cut above his eye as evidence, finally told the truth instead of the version he'd been protecting for years. By morning, she was in handcuffs in county holding, her one phone call going not to Trevor but to her mother, demanding someone come explain to the officers that this was all a misunderstanding between a married couple who'd simply had too much wine. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was documented now on record with a paper trail neither of them could erase, whether they wanted to admit that or not. I want to tell you my first feeling was satisfaction. Some kind of vindication after being called selfish and having a glass thrown at my head hours before my son ended up bleeding in an ER. That's not honestly what I felt. What I felt was grief, the specific grief of realizing my son had been drowning in something for years and had been too ashamed to reach for a hand that had always been there. The weeks that followed were harder than the night itself. Trevor filed for divorce, moved his things into my guest room temporarily while the process worked through the courts, and slowly, carefully, started telling me the full extent of what those years had actually looked like. Jessica's attorney tried to paint the incident as mutual, tried to suggest Trevor had provoked her, tried everything short of denying the injury itself. But the responding officer's report, the ER records from 2 years earlier that a curious nurse had flagged and cross-referenced, and a neighbor willing to testify about what she'd heard through that window for over a year, made the truth difficult to argue away. Jessica was convicted on the assault charge, given probation and a mandatory domestic violence intervention program rather than jail time, since it was her first official charge on record, though everyone in that courtroom understood it likely wasn't the first incident, only the first one anybody had finally written down. Trevor sat me down about a month after the divorce was finalized, in my kitchen this time, no wine glasses anywhere near either of us. "I need to actually apologize," he said, "not for the thing at dinner. For years of letting you think I didn't appreciate everything you gave up raising me. I made you the villain because it was easier than facing what my marriage had actually become." "You were scared," I said. "Scared people do strange things to survive. That doesn't make it fair to you." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't, but I'd rather have you here honest and healing than proud and silent in a house that was hurting you." Trevor's doing better now. He's in his own place, seeing a counselor twice a month, something Jessica's temper had made him too embarrassed to admit he needed for years. He calls me every Sunday now, not out of guilt, but because he actually wants to, and last month he showed up to my house with flowers and no occasion at all, just because he said he wanted to start actually noticing me the way I'd always noticed him. I still think about that wine glass sometimes, the sharp crack against the wall, the word selfish hanging in the air right before it. I understand now that both of those things came from the same place. A scared son trying to survive a marriage he didn't know how to leave, mistaking his mother's steady presence for something he could push against safely because he knew deep down I'd never throw anything back. He was right about that much. I never did. I just waited and stayed until the truth was finally ready to be heard.